Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. William Syms. Dr. Syms, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you for having me, Doc.
Man, it's a pleasure having you here. But before we get into the conversation, Dr. Syms have been in education for over 20 years, and that's real dedication. And one thing that we have heard a lot is that we want more Black men in education. So, man, I commend you for being in that space for 20 plus years. Currently, Dr. Syms is the executive dean at Sierra College, where is the equity, inclusion, and transformative leadership personnel. But before we get into the conversation itself that we're going to be having today, I will ask Dr. Syms to talk more about himself so we can get to learn more about him before we get into the conversation. So Dr. Syms, please share more about yourself before we get into the conversation today.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. So I am really blessed to be the product of a community and sort of village of support. Everything that I've been able to accomplish is because I have significant support from people in my hometown of Altadena and Pasadena, California, from the Clark Atlanta University community, from Alpha Phi Alpha, from the NAACP, churches, and various other community organizations. I'm really blessed to constantly have people who push me to be better, hold me accountable, and help me strategically create vision. I've worked in the education space for many years and been able to grow my career because of that support. I also spent some time with some nonprofits, both the NAACP's national staff and Amnesty International's, as well as serving as a congressional field rep for soon-to-be federal Senator Adam Schiff. And, a lot of my work has centered just on being of service to the community, building relationships, and expanding access and equity to resources. I'm blessed to be the father to two really amazing children, August and Ellington Syms, as well as the partner and husband of Shauna. And, this is just possible because even at home, I have that support, and I'm encouraged by my partner and my children to continue to be of service. So really grateful to be able to do this work and continue to expand access to equity and education in America.
Man, thank you. Just listening to you sharing, I can tell the value of having people around us that support the vision and dreams we have. And also just listening to you, I hear your commitment to your community. And if we want to see change, we must make the commitment. And just listening to you, I can tell that you are committed to, being of service. And through service, we can create change. Again, I said, man, I want to thank you for being here. So we're going to jump right into the conversation itself. So I normally start off with what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I think we center this concept of abundance is the foundation of it, that there's enough, that we don't have to fight, that we don't have to be oppositional, and that our communities can be in alignment for all of our good. I think specifically, I talk about the need to be allies in sort of racialized identity, as well as just with each other. There's enough for every Black person, every human on this earth to have what they need. I think we have to be centered and focused on allocating resources in a way that meets all of our needs. I think I'm unapologetically focused on creating success for Black communities, specifically as a Black man in building futures. It's the reason I have a Black wife. It's the reason we continue to connect with organizations like the NAACP or Urban League or 100 Black Men of America and the other number of organizations to create a community that we can live in and that our children and our future generations will thrive in. And so I think abundance is the mindset that helps us do that. And then I believe in this radical communication. And that means having really transparent, hard conversation and being able to be focused on being strategic and specific in goals. I can tell you I want you to do better, but if I don't outline what that looks like, how long you have to get better, what that means from the perspective of what we want to accomplish, then I'm not helping you. I'm not setting you up for success. So that radical transparency and that radical conversation look like being specific and having targets that we can hit, and then celebrating each of those milestones on the road to those targets. But we can't grow as men, as Black people, as a nation, if we're not focused on having those tangible goals.
Man, what you shared, it is important. I should say, being that, especially on the mindset and abundance mindset, I think, our community need to realize how important that is. Because when we have an abundance mindset, I would be okay seeing you being successful, because we have been conditioned, we have been hearing a lot, even growing up, that we have this crab in a barrel mentality. And with a abundance mindset, we will remove all that because enough is out there for us. And one thing that I've learned over the years, because I too have been conditioned to think in scarcity, right? So after I start to remove that mindset, start to reprogram my mind, I realized that the more successful Black people are, it becomes easier for me to be successful. So I'm okay with you because I don't know who is going to be successful first. So if I'm going to pull you down from not being successful, it may stop me from being successful, because you could be the person who will open the door for me. But because of my scarcity mindset, I pull you down, then none of us become successful when 10, 20, 30, or even 100 of us from the same community could be successful. So I'm glad that you shared that point, because I think that needs to be said a lot more within our community, so we can see the change, because we have the potential. We are so talented. We are so gifted. We are so resilient, but yet we don't have the success to show for all that we are capable of doing. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And that radical transparency, I believe it is important. That is valuable. We need to be okay hearing the truth, and so we can work from the truth to get to where we want to be. And I also like the point that you have made, where when we tell people to do something, we need to give them a way to do it, because anyone can tell you, man, oh, you need to do this. But if they, what I would say, if they know how, they would maybe doing it already. So we have to kind of, be willing to show them how to do it, not just say, oh, you need to do this, how it will happen. And these are the steps that you need to take. So I really appreciate you, sharing those points. And once I'm responding to you, and if you have something else to say, man, just jump in and say, because that's how we're going to make this thing go. But I really appreciate your point of view on the mindset that we need to have as Black people, as Black men, especially that abundance mindset. So I can be okay with you being successful. And that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening, and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
I think it's interesting that you bring up this concept of crabs in a barrel, because crabs have claws, right?
Yeah.
And if those claws link together to build a chain, crabs can pull each other out of the barrel.
Man.
And I think the other sort of ways in which that really is salient to this idea of what Black men can do is crabs have this hard shell that is protective and that acts as a defense shield. And so I think as Black men are protectors of the community and in their village, warriors who go help bring back resources and protect and expand the kingdom. A lot of it is about this need for us to get together and constantly be pushing each other in those conversations. So I think it looks different for all of us, but I think the one thing that's a connective thread is to align to create protection for our community. But we can't create that protection if we're not right. And so it goes back to that, being able to have those tough conversations and that transparency with each other that says, if you know that I'm amiss, right? If you know that I'm making some missteps, whether that be in relationships, in the way that I show up, in the if I'm not impeccable with my word, if there are just shortcomings, I need to be able to, you need to be able to come to me, say that, and I don't say, oh, Dr. Cross, you're a hater. No, Dr. Cross loves me, and Dr. Cross is creating accountability that's going to help me grow. And so that sort of radical transparency, I think, is one of the beginning bridges. But I also think as Black men, this phrase, and I can't remember who I've heard say it, but I know that there's a scholar and educator named Nigel Hakins Appiah who always says you can't correct if you don't connect. And so I'm always pushing for us before we tell each other what we need to do differently, for us to connect with each other and start to build relationships. And it starts sometimes with that nod or that wave across the street. You know, when I see you, I don't know you, but you a brother, you know, and I'm like, what's up, Doc? I may give you this. And so beginning that connection and being intentional about speaking, being intentional about the community building amongst us in every room that or every space that I going into that space and acknowledging you as a Black man. It doesn't matter if you're the Black man who is leading the meeting or cleaning up after the meeting, just to ensure that I'm building that intentional connection. And so as we build those connections, we can then help each other grow and then also create that accountability. And so I think, you know, much like the Million Man March many years ago and the 20-year reunion in 2015, and the work that folks like Ed Bush and others are doing with Amend, and the work that you're leading around these conversations and the book, we have to build this vast network where anybody can plug in and say, I want to be better.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're building this space where folks know any of those brothers in that book, if I find them, it's a step. It's the beginning step in getting me through that door. And so building that network is important. You are one of the folks building the nation in that way. And, you know, I always harken back to Marcus Garvey and the ways in which sort of the Black Star movement was about building the nation. This is it. And as we continue to do that and create that radical connectivity, we'll be able to do that. And we've seen it. Ivory Tolton talks about good data, and specifically the statistic about, Dr. Tolton talks about the statistics of Black men being educated. There are more Black men being educated in this time than ever before. Correct. And this bad statistic that says there's more incarcerated Black men, but that's not true. Correct. Black men are married, Black men are leading families, Black men are educating their communities in large mass. And so there's probably a concerted effort, right, to spread that misinformation. And the only reason that exists is because we are so impactful in our communities. And so continuing to partner in that way and build that connection is the way that we will create that positive change.
Man, you have said so much that I was like listening into the message. But as you shared, man, it's important for us to work together.
Yes.
It's important for us to realize the work that has been done within our communities, and that others are out there doing the work, and it's not always what society say about us. We have to realize that society, it is socially engineered for a reason, not for our benefit, but just to keep us to believe the false narrative. You know, the falsification was created for us to think one way of ourselves. And if we can keep thinking this way, then I don't have to worry about the Black men or the Black community, because they're going to think this is who they are. So I agree with your perspective wholeheartedly. And that was one of the reasons I started this journey. I tell you, before I even started, when I started my doctoral program, right, I start looking to see how many Black males out there who are doctors and in different positions. And I was shocked, to be honest with you, the amount of Black PhDs. And I was like, how, I don't know about this, how we don't see this. So this must be intentional. And so it really gave me that drive to say, you know what, I need to connect with other Black men who are out there doing the work, not just for my sake, because I may be going there and research, but I've already overcome certain belief about myself. But what about those young men in the community who don't have access and exposure to other Black men who are doing the work. Because a lot of us growing up in our communities do think that more Black men are going to prison than college. And because they don't think they can be successful in their educational journey, they say, you know what, I'm not going to even pursue that journey. So what you share and how we need to approach this when it comes to change, I'm agreeing with you 100%. We have to be the light. We have to acknowledge what others are doing, and we have to even reflect on what others have done. As you mentioned, Marcus Garvey and his work, we have to reflect on those people who have paved the way even before it looks like this, even before society want to acknowledge our greatness. So, man, I just really appreciate that perspective. I was listening so much, man. So I was just taking it. I may have to go back and play it and just to take some more notes from what you shared. But it's important that we acknowledge the work that we're doing to make a difference, because that's how we're going to change the narrative. So that leads me to my next question. How can we as Black men help to change the narrative today? I know you have touched on, Black men being more family oriented, which is not talked about. Black men pursuing education. Black men are there with their families and stuff like that. But, how can we help to change the narrative today?
I think a big part of it starts in knowing your history. I just am so blessed to have participated in the All African Educational Diasporic Symposium in Ghana in 2022. And this was led by the Amend organization. Amend is an organization that exists within California community colleges that focuses on expanding access and equity for Black male college students. 75% of all the Black college students in California are in community colleges. And so Amend has existed and is almost its 20th year to expand access and create success. And so when we got there, we were blessed to hear from Dr. Anthony Browder about the 14,000 years before Christ. And that is the history of Africa, or Kemet, right? That connects us to the greatness. There are more pyramids in the Sudan region than there are in Egypt. And this takes us and connects us to 14,000 years before we heard the name Jesus Christ, right? And so what must have existed in this era of Black excellence and really Black leadership, global African Kemetic leadership. And so when you connect to this history, you recognize that actually in the 2,000 years that we discussed post-Jesus, we have been significantly disconnected and uneducated about the ways in which Kemetic society or African society influence what we now know. When you talk about irrigation, math, celestial charting, those are African concepts, right? Those are Kemetic concepts. And so I think connecting to your foundation, and when you bring that up to the modern day, I think that's where scholars like Dr. Tolson come in and helping us understand that some of the data that we're told is just misinformation. There are more Black men married to Black women than any other time. There are more Black men getting education than any other time. There are more Black men leading in their communities than any other time. And so I think understanding your history and understanding the reasons why folks may seek to create misinformation about who Black men are in this country and what that accomplishes will help you understand how to change that narrative. I think also finding those sort of centers of mentorship and intergenerational mentorship is super important because, I think we all go through it in different ways. I'm blessed to have my father in my life and have grown up with my father and my uncles and grandfathers. And then those people who have adopted me as a son or as a brother, or as even now, as I play a father role, a godfather role in different lives of young men and people in the community, having that intergenerational sort of mentorship means that I am constantly being grown, I'm growing other folks, and then I'm contributing to this sort of ecological model of Black maleness. And then even expanding that into sort of the ways in which male identity is not gendered. And for us as Black men, that is a topic that probably isn't salient to how we were grown. But
Mhm.
I'm finding even in supporting Black men with queer identities or men who are not necessarily assigned male biologically at birth, I need to embrace and be an ally because I think Baldwin tells us that, and other folks tell us that those are men. And we, as a community of men, we have to be connected because if they're able to separate us by these sort of trivial boundaries, then we'll lose. And
Correct.
so I think the expansiveness of it helps us change the narrative, and then this constant growing of our or an evolution of our own concepts of what it can be allow us to be allies, allow us to protect each other more significantly, and just grow us. So I think that that ecological system of mentorship is helpful, and then continuing to know your history and learn more.
You know, man, as you talk about, I went to one of Mr. Brother sessions, and I tell you, man, I was like so inspired, empowered, I should say.
Yes.
Man, I was like, I've never heard any of this.
Right.
You know, where why did, you know, this, the information, why it was hidden? It was
Yeah.
like, it was a session that it's like you couldn't get enough.
Did he roll the timeline out?
I think so. He did it at Clark.
Okay.
I think he did. Dr. Akua
Yep.
invited me there, and man, I was like, man, we are not exposed to this.
Yeah.
Man, this, like the information he shared, man, you'll be so empowered. It's like you can take on the world. That's the
Yeah.
type of information, as you mentioned about Black excellence and Black leadership, and how what we have created, you know, it wasn't given to us. So we know our true power
Yeah.
and what we can do in the world. Man, I tell you, that session with, and I've listened to it a few times on YouTube when he talks about it, but man, we, more of us, need to be exposed to that information, or as many of our kids, the younger generation, need to be exposed to that, because they are exposed to the narrative that's only going to lead them in the wrong direction. So the
And,
more
and
they're empowered.
and the exposure really does this thing where it protects you. It protects you when you go into these spaces that are largely homogenous and not Black, right? When you go into white spaces, when you go into other spaces, I think having that knowledge of who you are, whose you are, right? Because it connects you to this divine protection from God. And then also, centers sort of in Yoso's theory, cultural capital that may not be valued in other spaces, right? But it tells us that those things like storytelling, the ways in which we're able to narrate and capture rooms, the power that you have just because if you stand in your confidence, people will gravitate towards you as a Black man, right? Those are sort of cultural capital things that Western society doesn't value. But when I empower you from a young age with that knowledge, no matter where you go, you have the armor of protection on. And it evokes this sort of really African spirituality that really guides us. We felt it in church when you caught the Holy Ghost, when the tambourine and the drums and those drum beats were moving. That was just connecting you to the ancestors, right? But you didn't know that because we were separated from that knowledge. So when you connect to it and realize that beat, that dance, that the way you move, the way that sister's hips shook was a way to bring that spirit in, right? And it evokes something that protects us. So, I wish I was, in my late 30s hearing Dr. Browder for the first time. And it was amazing because I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And I went to an HBCU, right? And I think even Dr. Black, who folks have heard with his Here They Come
Yes.
speech, he sat by a tree and would put that in our spirits. And you
Wow.
could find Dr. Black in the evenings, really expanding education and really, I think, putting the spiritual protection on us to send us out into the world. And so I think those are the things that help us, I think, change the narrative, but also really create a new pathway for us to expand our nation.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I tell you, going to Clark really gave me a different perspective, because my undergrad, I went to an HBCU, but it wasn't until I was on Clark campus I really felt that Black excellence, I should say. And because I think they were more intentional about providing that experience and that exposure to us. And even with Dr. Akoa's class, he was really intentional about teaching from an African centeredness, give
Yes.
us that experience because maybe he knew that some of us did not get that type of foundation. So I enjoyed those classes because I I was not exposed to the pyramid. You hear of it, but we did not hear of the work, that they have contributed to the world. So we weren't exposed to it. So I really, appreciate that foundation. And also you mentioned that we have to learn to work collectively. When we are divided within our community, that only makes us weak. And wherever we are weak, we can be infiltrated. So we have to learn to be strong together so we can make progress together, so we can achieve what is possible for us as we go forward. So, but man, thank you for sharing how we can change the narrative. There is so much to unpack in your response, but I know the listeners will play it more than once. They may have to take notes because sometimes when you hear something that makes you think, what comes after it, you may be still thinking about what you have heard first. So, but I really appreciate your perspective and how we can change the narrative today. I know in the early part of your response, I know you shared a lot of people who have helped you on your journey, but I'll still be asking this question: what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
My parents, first and foremost. My mom sort of cares for people by trade. She was a nurse and then a case manager before she retired. And then my father was an engineer, but my father's everybody's dad. And growing up, like that's just everybody's pops. Like having two parents in a middle class neighborhood in Pasadena. I was lucky because the collective of us, that was probably our norm. And then for everybody else, my dad and people like Horace Wormley Sr., who if you're from Pasadena, or Horace, Mr. Moody, and there's a couple of other Black men in our community who were just collective fathers. My dad is in that council of Black men. And so that gave me a really strong foundation. Clark Atlanta University, certainly having been a community college student, and Jackie Dodds at Pasadena City College, Mike McClellan, many folks and many folks at Pasadena City College, and then getting me to Clark Atlanta, that opened my eyes to the world. I met every type of Black person. I didn't know we were that diasporic. I had just been exposed to Black people in California, really, and made a couple trips to the Midwest as to see my family. Been to New York, been to Chicago, but Clark Atlanta was the world, and there were Black people from all over the world there, and there were amazingly intelligent Black people pursuing the same things that I was. And then the NAACP. Man, I grew up, working on social justice issues, whether that be shutting down teen prison camps in Florida, or the death penalty abolition, or the Marcus Dixon case in Georgia that we fought to get him released. And so people like Alethea Bonello and Loretta Brown and Charles White, and I think the Alpha Phi chapter, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, became family, and I was able to do a lot and grow a lot at Clark Atlanta and grow up. And so I think that prepared me for the world. I've had any number of mentors, and folks can continue to contribute to that. There's probably too many folks to name, but in that early part of my life, those are the folks who set me on this path. And then, getting opportunities to be led and mentored by like Ann Pfeiffer and other folks in Congressman Schiff's office, and Dr. Cynthia Olivo and Dr. Erica Inger Jonas and Willie Duncan and so many other folks who have, Bob Bell, Dr. Bob Bell has been formative. And there's so many folks who have just contributed to my success. So that's probably what's done it. And then as I became a father, certainly my children, pushed me to continue. And, you know, when I was in my doctoral journey and I was about to quit, because you've done it.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
different thing. And it's not like anything you've ever done.
correct.
My kids looking at me every day in the eyes and me having to show them you don't get to quit was the thing that pushed me through the hardest I think I've experienced as a professional father in that and navigating all those things. My kids, man, like their children are a whole nother level of motivation. So, you know, I think they got the battery in my back now, and I feel like I got a lot of energy to grow.
Oh yeah. You got to be the example for them because, you don't want to be later telling them to do something that you didn't do.
And that was it. That
Yeah,
was it. I can't tell you in 15 years when you're telling me you want to quit, you're gonna tell me, Dad, remember when you quit?
correct, correct. You
And
got to,
you can't do that.
yeah,
You can't.
you got to be the example because that's the easiest way to teach them what they can do. They can see you struggle, but
Yeah.
they should not see you quit. They can see that,
Ooh,
yeah, the journey can get tough, but look, I didn't quit. So
yeah,
you have it in you as well to push through to achieve the goal. So we're not going to quit because
yeah.
to tell them to continue and we quit, man, we're going to be playing hypocrite. Uh,
And you'll do what I do, not what I say.
correct, correct, correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And just listening to all the people you have listed who have helped you on your journey and who have mentored you on your journey. So how would you encourage others who may not have that type of connection like immediately? How would you encourage someone who have the desire but don't have maybe the father figure there? They don't have immediate people that they can connect with. How would you encourage them to get on the right path and make the connections so they can feel empowered to continue on their journey?
You know, I think you can't have too much pride or ego that gets in the way of reaching out. Like this is the period in time where I think you can connect with folks in the most easiest, like digitally or through social media or other things. I think a lot of it is pride, you know, or being embarrassed to just go be like, brother, I think what you're doing is so dope. Could you give me 15 minutes and just explain it? Or sister, like you making this impact and I'm trying to figure out what you do. So can I come set up chairs at your event? Can I come serve food? And if I can get 5 minutes, I think like Loretta Brown, Alethea Bonello, Charles White, specifically in that time in the NAACP regional office, like Miss Ash and people like Bakari Sellers. So you got to think we were all interns. So you got like Bakari Sellers, Hadari Williams, Francis Johnson, you know, Derek Johnson, who was president of who's the CEO now, was president of the Mississippi. So we were like going down to Mississippi for conferences and setting up. I'm picking Jesse Jackson up from the airport. I'm driving Andrew Young to the airport. We're doing Rosa Parks' funeral, Coretta Scott King's funeral, but I'm like putting programs on seats.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous work, but that sort of proximity to greatness and history put me in this space where, well, people recognize my face. And so years later, with credentials and other experiences, they remember that little boy who would be at every event, who would also getting free food because as a college student, that free food was an anchor for me. But
Mhm.
that sweat equity you can't beat. And so I think getting out there, if you can't do it in person digitally, because it's expensive, right, to
Yeah.
travel and do all those things, but digitally showing up in those spaces, submitting questions, regularly engaging folks, and people are going to turn you down. And there's no malicious part of it. They're just busy and trying to get home to be with their families at night. But the more you're persistent and the more you can put yourself in proximity to it, the relationship's just established. Because if I've seen you 7 times, the eighth time I'll be like, hey man, what do you do?
Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of persistence, and if you ask most people, that's probably how we got to know each other. Because I'm annoying, and I have an ego, but it just exists in different ways. And so my ego isn't bruised when somebody like get out of my face. I'm gonna just show up again and again and again and again, and eventually you're gonna tell me what I need. So
Yeah. But man, I really appreciate you sharing that because young people, especially who may not have direct access
yeah,
to people, may think that they don't or can't. And as you mentioned, which you shared, I think it is really important. We have to sometimes put the pride and ego aside to make the connections that can help us to move forward. Because I've connected with several people. I've done over 120 of these, a lot of these interviews.
Yeah.
And most of the individuals that I've interviewed, they are well established, and they didn't know who I was. And I just send email, and sometimes I have to send that message multiple times before they respond to my. So that is a valuable point, because there are young people out there who think, oh, I don't know that person, so I'm not going to, or they may not respond. But sometimes we have to just put the pride and ego aside and reach out. And sometimes, as you mentioned, we're going to get no's, but that's part of the journey, especially when you have the desire for more. But also, you said something that I believe is important: putting that sweat equity, showing up in those spaces and do the menial work, because sometimes we don't know who is seeing us. And sometimes people are looking for those individuals who are doing the work that most people would not want to do, because there is something good about you showing up and doing the work, because a lot of people don't want to do the work. So, man, I thank you for sharing that, and that's a great reminder, especially for those who want to connect with others. Which leads me to my next question: what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today? I know you talk about it a little bit, because you share about the BS that Dr. Tulsa talk about. But what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
I always start with, I'm very proud and excited to be a Black man. It's the best thing that I get to do, and be in community with Black men. As I stated, I think Black men are doing amazing things in the ways in which they care for their children, in the ways in which they show up for their partners, and the ways in which Black men are unlearning some of the things that have been harmful in our community. So this is an era of excellence and growth for Black men that is dynamic, that is ongoing, and I think that is happening in transformative ways. I think we're learning to be better partners. I think we're learning to do things in ways that were different. And what happened in generations before us was for them. But it's not the way in which we can be of service to our community. And I think as a collective, we're heeding that call. Part of what encourages me is even when I see people like Jeff Johnson and Quentin James organize those Black Men for Harris calls. It's Black men standing up and standing in the gap for a Black woman, and standing up for the community, and being able to be willing to say, I'll stand behind you, to the side of you, to the front of you, wherever you need me to help you get across this goal. And I think that just is exemplary of where Black men are today. We recognize we have to unlearn some of the things that our grandfathers, uncles, fathers, friends taught us, and in order to help our communities grow, in order for us to be better partners and continue the growth of our children and expansion of what our children are able to accomplish, they need us to learn to access language that we didn't have. I think from a mental health perspective, we're seeking help in ways in which we haven't before, which is really creating better service to our families, because we're becoming well in ourselves, and we're navigating those generational curses and those things that we were told we just couldn't. I think
Black men don't do.
yeah, that and I think we're of a similar age where we're like, we just don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, you have to, bro. Like it's okay to not be okay, but you have to do the thing that makes you okay.
Correct.
And you have to
Correct.
get the help. And so normalizing that mental health access, and that wellness, I think getting on that wellness journey, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, is something that we're accessing in dynamic numbers in ways that has never been. So I'm deeply encouraged in this moment, in this time, and just hope that in my own practice and in my own life, I continue to seek those things and grow the ways in which I access it, specifically around physical health. When you do when you're in a doctoral journey, you just kind of do everything. You throw everything out the window to get across the finish line.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So
Yeah, that finish line is very important,
yeah,
very, very important. Yeah, man. But you shared a very important point. Although let me say, as you acknowledge the good things that we're doing, which encourage us to see the possibility.
Yeah.
But you shared something that I believe is important, which you acknowledge that we're doing, and that is unlearning what is harmful to us. Because when we become better, man, things change.
Yeah.
Not just for ourselves, but things change for all of us, because we have been conditioned to think and act a certain way. And once we can unlearn those harmful things, man, we become unstoppable. They know we are great.
Yeah.
It's for us to know that we are great. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
It's
And
for
that's why
us to
they
know.
hide that information. That's why the information is so hard to access. Right? Like that's why Browder's books don't get published by Random House.
Yeah.
That, because I'm not gonna make it easy for you to access this information that tunes you into something that's gonna change the world for y'all. Like I'm not gonna make it easy for you to get access to Akula, right? And the African Centered Education Theory and all those. Like he's self-publishing.
Yeah.
Because those large companies are like, no, we're not. No, we're not gonna mass produce this, right? So yeah.
Yeah, man, it's just hopeful, I would say. It's just hopeful. Each day we get to see what is possible. We just have to continue to build on it. And to go back to what you have shared is to develop that abundance mindset, because
That's
I
it.
think that's going to be critical in where we go. Because for us to reach the heights of what's possible from an educational standpoint, not entertainment, because they pushed us up in entertainment, because the entertainment continue to, I believe, degrade the community. I don't have no problem with entertainment. I listen to the music, not all of the music, but the education within our community will elevate us so much, but that is not pushed as much as entertainment. And I think we can do some of the pushing, but that's where the abundance mindset comes in, to be okay with your brother, your sister achieving at a certain level, because I am strongly in support of another brother or sister achieving success, because their success makes it easier for me. And what I've also learned on my journey is that I don't know who will achieve success first. And it confirms for me a few years ago when I started school here in the state. There were few people in the community that wanted to start a business, right? And after 10 years, they haven't started that business. But someone came after 10 years of being here and started a business that provided the opportunity for that person who wanted to start 10 years ago. You see what I'm saying? And if we never know,
Yeah.
and that person is now in business doing something for almost 5 years that they wanted to do 10 years before they started, because we don't know who will be the one. And so that's why having that abundance mindset and be supportive of someone who have the dream and desire to make a difference, because we don't know who they will provide opportunity for. And I really strongly believe it. But that's part of unlearning what will only keep us from making the progress that is possible for us. And I think we kind of answered this question, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. What change do you want to see in general amongst Black men?
I think I answer this more about my own journey, and I think several of us experience it. Is like recognizing fear is a liar, and that anger that we develop is probably related to fear. And so, accessing that mental health support to help you manage the triggers of your own emotions and learning to self-regulate is so helpful, because for me, like I became so angry because if I let people know that I was vulnerable or that I was afraid of something, it created physical, like I was afraid for my physical safety, because you think it's sweet, so now you're gonna take advantage of me. And so I learned to mask all that with anger, and just through this series of sort of mental health supports and other things, I recognized much of my anger was just hiding fear or masking fear. And so when you recognize fear is a liar, you don't need either. And you're able to navigate the world in a different way. There's a brother named David Gathers, and he works with another brother named Yancey Duran and Ramses Bolden. And those brothers are doing this work around Black fatherhood that's amazing. And think they lead these exercises in breath work. And I didn't even realize how much tension I was holding in until I started sort of meeting with this group and experiencing these breathwork exercises where I'm just releasing. And sometimes I am engaging chants or screaming or just sort of really releasing the tension, and then being intentional about setting sort of my intentions for the world and how I'll show up in the space. And so I think connecting to that sort of practice for Black men is something I hope we get more of, because it is about breaking those curses.
Yeah, man, that's important. And that's a great reminder. We have to unlearn certain things and acknowledge our own fears
Yeah.
and be okay, as you mentioned, being vulnerable, but understand where that vulnerability or why we are not vulnerable with how we feel and
Yeah.
what may cause us not to want to, express that feeling. Because as you mentioned, some people will want to take advantage of you sharing that you are struggling or you have this challenge and stuff like that. And that's also a part of us, unlearning certain behavior and be okay with listening to another brother and say, man, yes, not going to judge you based on how you feel or the struggles and stuff like that that you're dealing with. And once we get to that point where we know that the persons that we're talking to will not judge our feeling or our experience. I think, as Black men, as you mentioned, that yes, we are doing better. But I think once we get to that point, more Black men will talk about, their challenges and, be okay with not feeling less of a person to be struggling, because sometimes it makes them feel less of a person. Well, in their mind, because they don't know how well the person will respond to what they are sharing. But that's a great reminder. And I think there are progress there, but, we still have room to grow in that area, where we become more vulnerable and talk about our challenges. So my next question to you is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
Katrina. I mean, my life is really pre-Katrina and post-Katrina. I think I was on a good path and in a good place, but I was really caught up in myself and probably selfish and very self-centered, and probably still after Katrina, but less so. But Katrina, I never seen devastation in that way, and so I was really blessed to be able to go down about 10 days after, to New Orleans. So we went to Louisiana, Mississippi, and was just serving the communities by unloading Walmart trucks with the Red Cross. But it just shook me to my core. It was probably the most devastating thing I'd ever seen. And it was radically transformative in the way in which I show gratitude. I think it just showed me how much of a punk I was and ungrateful, and I felt ashamed. I think I felt a deep sense of shame for the way in which I had been navigating the world. I wasn't treating people well. I wasn't kind. I was probably arrogant. And I remember that trip, leaving and coming back and not being able to talk probably for the first day,
Wow.
just because I was experiencing all these emotions, and then it just something snapped. It was probably the first time that I had an instant Damascus moment, if you will. Like, that was my road to Damascus moment. I had to be different. I had to do the work from a different lens, and I had to focus on being of service. I think I've learned progressively and scaffolded what that meant over time, but that was really the first moment I recognized my own I think my own engagement needed to change. So Katrina is the fatherhood, getting married, making mistakes professionally, all those things have contributed to my continued growth. But I know Katrina was the moment that probably the most life-changing.
Man, and I really appreciate you sharing that story about being grateful and understanding the struggles that others may be experiencing,
Yeah.
and how sometimes, as you mentioned, that we are ungrateful for what we have, and
Yeah.
not realizing that there are people out there who are dealing with, they're at a more disadvantage
Yeah.
than where we are, and not appreciating what we do have. And sometimes not having that appreciation causes us to, not say not having that appreciation, but sometimes we'll look down on people just because we think we are better, and not understanding that, man, you know what, things could be worse, because that's a natural disaster. Some of those people didn't do anything to be in the situation that they are in. So you know what, anything can happen over here, and my life change.
Yeah.
So it's learning to appreciate, or even to treat people who are not in the position even to help you.
Yep.
And I tell you, for me, I think that maybe something that's natural, because I grew up in poverty and stuff like that. But sometimes you do naturally, until you get to that moment where you realize that, man, you got to treat everyone equally. It doesn't matter where you are, who you are, you in a suit or no suit. Treat everyone equally. As there's a quote that says, treat the janitor well as how you treat the CEO, or it tells the type of character you are based on how you treat the janitor, not so much of the CEO, because the CEO may be able to do something for you, but the janitor is not someone who may be able to do something for you in that immediate moment. But it tells more about who you are by how you treat that person who cannot do anything for you. And I think as Black men, we have to really value that approach to life, because again, we have to really, it's not about saying we are our brother's keeper. We need to live it, and I don't think we are actually living it yet. We talk about it a lot, we share it every day, but we are not living it how we're supposed to. And just hearing your story and how that experience helped you to understand the importance of treating everyone equally despite their position in life. And if we can get there, man, we can break a lot of the curses, because again, the person we lift up can be the person who is supposed to open the door years from now for us. But because we didn't help them, we didn't even get the chance to go through that door. Because, and that is like, it is like something that I really think about a lot every day. Because as I said, it was confirmed to me, someone who came 10 years after I graduated from college, to be the one to open the door for someone who had started the college with me. I was like, you know what, man, this is important. We got to treat people the best way possible, and don't really look down on people just because we're in a better position than they are, because this is life, and life can change at any moment. So the person we look down on and treat unfairly can be the person. And we've seen this several times. You see this in skit, but you see it happen in real life, that someone treats someone bad in the car park, but when they get into the room to do the interview, that's the person interviewing them. You see what I'm saying? So we never know what life entails, but I really appreciate you sharing that story. I think it's a great message and reminder to all of us on this journey that we call life. So my next question to you is, what life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Slowing down. I think pacing is everything. So you got to know, I think this is life is a vehicle, and it's just the thing that's taking you to different places in your journey. And so you got to know when to hit the gas and when to hit the brakes, and then when to ease off the gas and not use your brakes. Because there's times in life where you want to keep making forward momentum, but you just can't be going 80 miles per hour. So you got to get to 20, but you got to slow that by easing off the gas. You don't necessarily need to hit the brakes because you don't want to jerk the car forward, right? And I think life is the same thing, understanding that pacing and how to time things, because you have an engine. You can't burn your engine out. You got to keep getting the oil change. You got to keep making sure that there are certain, tests and things. You got to look under the hood, make sure that the motor is good, and that's the thing that pushes you through life. And so I think that is the lesson I've learned in the last 5 years that's helped me get into the executive part of my career, because I don't get to do as much, right? My job is to coach. My job is to help people, get them the resources, and really identify how I provide training and support for them to do it. And so pacing is everything, because I can't overburden my people and create initiative fatigue. I can't go too slow and we never do anything. And so that pacing, and as I get better with the pacing, is how we accomplish more and create sustainable careers and sustainable work that ultimately helps us achieve the change. So that didn't come to me until, maybe 7 years ago. I think I got good at it 5 years ago. I think the last 2 years have made me really, really good at it. And I think that's what's taking me hopefully to this place of growth that I'm experiencing now. But that's probably the thing. If I had known, I graduated from high school at 16. I graduated from college at like 20, and have really found success quickly. And even, as I approach 40, I'm probably in a place that I am because of how early I access work and other things. But everybody's not on that same trajectory. And so you can't have that expectation. It's unrealistic and it messes up your leadership. And so that pacing, and then letting people be their own genius, right? Like your genius is different than mine. And so if I take that into account, it helps with the pacing.
I like your analogy with the car and pacing oneself, because as Black men, we are told that, man, we just got to work, 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 and go the extra mile and do all that we can do. But I was reading an article that talks about upward mobility for Black men. And one of the things that they mentioned in it, yes, we're going to work hard, but even if we sometimes achieve the goal we want to achieve, we achieve it at the expense of our health.
Yeah.
And so you sharing that analogy is a great reminder on the importance of balancing what we're doing so we don't burn ourselves out. And everyone is different. Some people can manage more or manage less. So it's important that you know who you are or who we are as Black men. But that analogy of pacing ourselves is important because as you were talking about the car, just recently I was driving and it was a 60 miles out, on the road. So I was driving 60 miles, but, I still continue in the 60 mile, but I was in a 35-mile zone and then I got pulled over. So, it's important that even paying attention, because
Yeah.
sometimes we have to slow down. As you mentioned, we have to pay attention where we are because sometimes we need to absorb what is happening around us, but because we're in this fast pace, we don't get to absorb that which we're supposed to, and can lead to getting a ticket. It may be, that's just, and sometimes it's just, you just burned out, not, learning what we're supposed to. So, but I really appreciate you sharing that analogy because sometimes we try to overdo it. And that's something that I have to tell myself at times because, I'm one of those individuals, who will be doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. So before we get to the end of the conversation today, where can the listeners find you and help support the great work that you're doing to make a difference?
So I'm on LinkedIn at Dr. William Syms. I can be found Dr. Syms on Instagram.
Okay.
I think we talked a little bit about today. So you give me a week, I probably have a new place where you can find me. So
Okay.
I'm excited about all the changes and all the growth and all the opportunity to do some things, some new things. And I think the amazing people at Sierra College that I work with have made kind of growth possible. So really excited to continue to grow and continue to grow the work we do here in the system and across the country. So, but I'm always appreciative of the prayers and lifting me up to ensure that I'm sort of following this divine path and listening to the ways in which God wants me to be used and to be of service to the community. So I'll be at homecoming this October.
All right, all right.
So join us join us the 17th through the 21st in Atlanta, and we have a good time.
Man, that's right. That's right. Most definitely. Yeah, I think I missed it last year, but I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to this one this year. But also, I will definitely put where they can find you in the description so they can reach out to you and learn more about what you're doing and see how they can help you or you can help them on their journey and what they want to achieve. So my final question to you today, what impact do you want to have on the world?
when it's all done and they're reading that obituary, I hope the message is about me being of service and recognizing that the work that I did was in partnership. You know, service and partnership are the two foundational blocks of this work. I'm not a hero. I'm not a superhero. I'm not here to save the day. I'm just here to be a really, really good partner to the communities that I serve. And so my life, whether that's in the ways in which I'm of service to my family, as a father, as a partner, as a son, brother, you know, I hope, and my desire is that I was of service and I was a great partner.
Man, you know what? As Dr. Kimbrough often says, service is the rent we pay for our time on earth. So, man, being of service is one of the best thing we can do here whilst we're here, because that's what we got to do. Be of service. So, Dr. Syms, man, it was a pleasure having you here today on the Black Male Impact. I know the listeners will be appreciative of all that you have shared today. So, man, again, I just want to say thanks for being here on the Black Male Impact.
Thank you. Be blessed, brother.
It's a pleasure. And always, listeners, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will help us on this journey to make the difference that we are capable of making. Here on the Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. And that's why we look for guests who will share information and insight that can help us as we continue to make a positive impact in the world.